The voice cast of Frozen played a crucial role in transforming what could have been a simple animated fairy tale into a deeply emotional and culturally transformative film. At the heart of the movie are two sisters, Elsa and Anna, brought to life by Idina Menzel and Kristen. Their performances did more than simply deliver dialogue and songs. They defined the tone, emotional authenticity, and musical intensity that would ultimately shape the identity of the film. Idina Menzel, who voices Elsa, was already widely respected for her work in musical theater long before Frozen. She originated the role of Maureen in Rent on Broadway and later became globally recognized for playing Elphaba in Wicked. Her theatrical background gave her a powerful vocal presence that was both technically precise and emotionally raw. When she recorded Let It Go, her voice carried not just strength but vulnerability. Her experience in portraying complex, misunderstood women on stage directly informed her interpretation of Elsa as a character torn between fear and self-acceptance. Menzel's performance elevated Elsa from a traditional fairy tale queen into a modern symbol of empowerment. The success of Frozen introduced her to a younger global audience and cemented her as a cross-generational icon. Her association with Elsa followed her into concerts, award shows, and public appearances, intertwining her identity with the character in a way few voice actors experience. Kristen, who voices Anna, brought a very different but equally vital energy to the film. Known before Frozen for her work on the television series Veronica Mars and for her comedic roles, Belle also had a background in musical theater, having studied music and performed in stage productions earlier in her career. Her voice performance infused Anna with warmth, awkward charm, and emotional openness. Belle approached Anna not as a flawless princess but as an impulsive, hopeful young woman craving connection. She leaned into Anna's comedic timing, making her relatable and grounded. Her singing voice carried sincerity rather than grandeur, which contrasted beautifully with Menzel's powerful belts. This contrast helped establish the dynamic between the sisters. Frozen expanded Belle's profile within family entertainment and reinforced her reputation as a performer capable of balancing humor and heartfelt sincerity. Jonathan Groff provided the voice of Kristoff, the rugged ice harvester. Like Menzel, Groff came from a strong musical theater background, having starred in Spring Awakening and later becoming known for television roles such as in Glee and Mindhunter. His stage experience gave him control and emotional nuance, especially in scenes where Kristoff's rough exterior softens around Anna. Groff recorded many of his lines in close proximity to a real reindeer to capture natural rhythms for conversations with Sven, even though he also voiced Sven's grunts and reactions himself. This playful commitment added authenticity to Kristoff's character. Frozen broadened Groff's reach into animated musical storytelling and strengthened his association with emotionally complex, musically inclined characters. Josh Gad voiced Olaf, the snowman whose innocence and humor became central to the film's lighter tone. Gad had experience in theater and comedy, including performances in The Book of Mormon on Broadway. His improvisational skills and expressive vocal range allowed the animators to build Olaf's personality around his performance. Many of Olaf's small gestures, comic pauses, and childlike inflections were directly inspired by Gad's recordings. He brought warmth to what might otherwise have been a simple comic relief character, turning Olaf into a symbol of unconditional love and optimism. The success of Frozen made Gad synonymous with Olaf, leading to continued roles in sequels, shorts, and theme park attractions. Hans, voiced by Santino Fontana, initially presents himself as a charming prince. Fontana's background in musical theater allowed him to perform with polished confidence, which made the character's eventual narrative shift more impactful. His refined vocal quality helped sell the illusion of sincerity early in the film. This casting choice reinforced the film's intention to subvert traditional romantic tropes. The film was directed by Chris Buck and Jennifer Lee. Buck had previously co-directed Tarzan, bringing experience in dynamic character animation and emotional storytelling. Lee, who became the first woman to direct a feature-length animated film at the studio, played a transformative role in reshaping Frozen's narrative. Originally, the story was more loosely inspired by Hans Christian Andersen's The Snow Queen, but Lee helped center the emotional arc on the sister relationship rather than a traditional romance. Her writing emphasized internal conflict, fear, and love between siblings. Lee's influence shifted the project from a conventional fairy tale into a story about identity and familial bonds. Her leadership marked a significant moment in the studio's history, and the film's success elevated her career into a major creative force within the animation industry. The screenplay evolved through collaboration between Lee and the broader story team. The creative process involved extensive storyboarding and rewriting. The character of Elsa was initially conceived as more villainous, but as the song Let It Go developed, the team recognized that her emotional journey felt more powerful when framed as self-discovery rather than antagonism. This shift dramatically altered the film's tone and theme. The music was composed by Kristen and Robert Lopez, a songwriting duo with strong roots in musical theater. Robert Lopez had already achieved acclaim for his work on Avenue Q and the Book of Mormon, while Kristen Lopez brought lyrical sensitivity and narrative clarity. Together, they crafted songs that functioned as emotional turning points rather than decorative interludes. Their theatrical sensibility ensured that each number advanced character development. The success of the soundtrack not only contributed to Frozen's global phenomenon, but also solidified the Lopez duo as leading figures in contemporary musical storytelling. The film's producer, Peter Del Vecchio, oversaw the long and complex production process. Animated features require years of coordination between writers, animators, composers, and technical artists. Under his supervision, the film balanced artistic experimentation with narrative clarity. The collaboration between departments was essential in achieving the seamless integration of music, story, and visual spectacle. The animation team also deserves recognition for shaping the performances. Supervising animators studied the voice actors' facial expressions and body language during recording sessions. They incorporated subtle gestures inspired by Menzel and Bell, allowing the animated characters to reflect the humanity of their performers. Technological advances in rendering snow and ice played a crucial role in visual storytelling, but it was the emotional performances that grounded the spectacle. Frozen became more than an animated success. It reshaped the careers of nearly everyone involved. It transformed Idina Menzel's voice into a global anthem of empowerment. When Frozen was released by Walt Disney Animation Studios in 2013, few could have predicted the scale of its cultural impact. What began as an animated musical inspired loosely by Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tale, The Snow Queen quickly evolved into a global phenomenon that reshaped children's media, family entertainment, merchandising strategies, and even conversations about identity and empowerment. Frozen did not simply succeed at the box office. It embedded itself into everyday life across generations and across continents. One of the most visible signs of its cultural dominance was the song Let It Go. Performed in the film by Idina Menzel, the song became far more than a musical number. It turned into an anthem of personal freedom and emotional release. It climbed music charts worldwide, was translated into dozens of languages, and became a staple of talent shows, school recitals, and viral video covers. Children sang it in classrooms and living rooms, while adults connected to its message of self-acceptance and breaking free from fear. Its popularity extended into online culture, where countless parody videos, mashups, and reinterpretations circulated on platforms like YouTube. The song's reach demonstrated that animated film music could once again dominate mainstream conversation in a way reminiscent of earlier Disney renaissances. But with the amplification power of modern social media, the cultural saturation extended well beyond music. Elsa's ice blue gown became one of the most sought-after costumes in children's retail history. Toy stores struggled to keep Elsa dolls in stock during the first holiday season after release. The demand was so overwhelming that it sparked news coverage and discussions about supply chains and marketing strategies. Anna's braids, Elsa's snowflake imagery, and Olaf plush toys became ubiquitous symbols in households around the world. The merchandising wave was not just commercially successful. It demonstrated how deeply children connected with the characters. Frozen also significantly influenced how princess narratives were perceived. For decades, animated princess films often centered around romantic fulfillment. Frozen shifted that focus to sisterhood. The climactic act of true love was not a kiss from a prince, but Anna's sacrifice for Elsa. This narrative twist resonated with families and encouraged broader conversations about redefining love in storytelling. Parents praised the emphasis on sibling bonds and emotional courage. Children saw that bravery could take many forms beyond romantic rescue. This subtle yet powerful shift influenced later animated films that emphasized friendship, family, or self-discovery over traditional romance arcs. The film's influence extended into theme parks operated by the Walt Disney Company. Attractions based on Frozen were rapidly integrated into parks worldwide. In Florida, the Maelstrom ride in Epcot was transformed into Frozen Ever After, immersing guests in the kingdom of Arendelle. Character meet and greets featuring Elsa and Anna drew record-breaking lines. Stage adaptations and live performances were introduced across international parks, reinforcing the film's global resonance. This integration into physical spaces allowed families to step inside the world of the film, blurring the boundary between cinematic storytelling and experiential entertainment. The film also played a role in shaping conversations about emotional expression. Elsa's struggle with concealing her powers became widely interpreted as a metaphor for various forms of identity suppression. While the film itself never defines her powers in political or social terms, audiences found personal meaning in her journey towards self-acceptance. Many viewers connected her experience to themes of anxiety, difference, or even LGBTQ identity. Regardless of interpretation, the cultural dialogue surrounding Elsa demonstrated how animated films could serve as mirrors for complex emotional realities. In children's media, Frozen influenced character archetypes. Studios began prioritizing flawed heroines who grappled with internal conflict. Anna's impulsiveness and Elsa's fear felt more psychologically layered than earlier fairy tale portrayals. The comedic sidekick, embodied by Olaf, balanced innocence with surprising philosophical insight. Subsequent animated films across multiple studios reflected similar tonal blends of humor, emotional vulnerability, and musical storytelling. Globally, Frozen achieved extraordinary box office success, becoming one of the highest-grossing animated films of its time. Its international appeal was reinforced by carefully localized dubbing efforts. In many countries, the local language versions of Let It Go became hits in their own right. This multilingual approach allowed children worldwide to experience the film in culturally resonant ways. The snow and ice aesthetic, inspired by Nordic landscapes, also contributed to its distinctive identity in global markets. The film's presence in everyday culture became almost unavoidable during its peak years. Parents joked about hearing Let It Go on endless repeat in their homes. Halloween costumes were dominated by Elsa and Anna for multiple consecutive years. School talent shows featured Frozen medleys. Even television shows and films outside of Disney referenced Frozen in jokes or visual gags, acknowledging its omnipresence. The phrase "let it go" entered common speech as shorthand for releasing frustration. Social media amplified this generational resonance. Children who grew up with Frozen often documented their fandom online through art, cosplay, and song covers. Adults shared humorous posts about parenting in a Frozen-obsessed household. The film bridged generational gaps because it offered layered storytelling. Children were captivated by magic and humor, while adults appreciated the emotional complexity and musical sophistication. Frozen also influenced the business model of animated musicals. Studios recognized the renewed commercial viability of theatrical musical storytelling. Original songs once again became central marketing tools rather than secondary features. Soundtrack albums gained renewed importance, and live performance tie-ins became part of promotional cycles. Frozen demonstrated that a strong musical identity could drive both emotional impact and long-term brand loyalty. The generational significance of Frozen lies partly in timing. It emerged during an era of rapid digital sharing, allowing songs and scenes to spread virally. It arrived at a moment when audiences were receptive to stories about internal strength rather than external rescue. It balanced traditional fairy tale aesthetics with modern emotional awareness. For many children born in the early 2010s, Frozen became their defining animated musical, much like earlier generations had their own landmark films. Over time, the film's cultural footprint has remained visible. References continue to appear in television, advertising, and online memes. Frozen-themed birthday parties remain common years after release. Its imagery, music, and themes persist in collective memory. More than a commercial success, Frozen became a shared cultural experience. It shaped how a generation sang, dressed, imagined princesses, and understood the meaning of true love. Its influence continues to ripple outward, proving that animated storytelling can shape not only entertainment trends but emotional language and social conversation across the world. The creation of Frozen at Walt Disney Animation Studios was anything but straightforward. The film underwent years of development, multiple conceptual revisions, and significant technological experimentation before it reached the screen. What audiences eventually saw as a seamless winter fantasy was the result of intense collaboration, creative risk, and repeated reinvention behind the scenes. The project initially began as a loose adaptation of Hans Christian Andersen's The Snow Queen, a darker and more fragmented fairy tale. In early story versions, Elsa was positioned more clearly as a villain, echoing the original source material's icy antagonist. The narrative revolved more traditionally around Anna attempting to stop her. However, as development progressed, the creative team struggled to find emotional depth in that dynamic. Something felt incomplete. The breakthrough came not from dialogue, but from music. When songwriters Kristen Anderson-Lopez and Robert Lopez presented an early version of Let It Go, the entire direction of the film shifted. The song framed Elsa not as malicious, but as fearful and repressed. Its lyrics captured liberation rather than domination. The directors, Chris Buck and Jennifer Lee, recognized that this emotional pivot was more compelling. The story was rewritten to make Elsa misunderstood instead of evil. That single song triggered months of restructuring, rewriting, and reboarding scenes. Entire sequences were discarded to support the new character arc. The voice recording process also shaped the film's development. Unlike live-action films where actors perform together on set, animated features often record actors separately. However, Frozen experimented with overlapping recordings to capture more natural rhythms. Kristen Bell and Jonathan Groff recorded some scenes together to build chemistry between Anna and Kristoff. This collaborative energy influenced animators, who studied video footage of the actors' gestures and facial expressions during recording sessions. Subtle movements, such as Bell's spontaneous hand motions or Groff's physical leaning into emotional lines, were translated into animation references. Idina Menzel's recording sessions for Let It Go became legendary within the studio. Her theatrical training allowed her to deliver emotionally intense takes with vocal precision. Animators later studied her breathing patterns and jaw movements to replicate the physicality of singing in extreme close-up shots. The moment when Elsa builds her ice palace was animated after the final vocal recording was completed, allowing the visuals to match the exact rise and fall of her performance. The synergy between voice and animation gave the sequence its dramatic power. Technologically, Frozen presented a major challenge: snow. Animating snow convincingly at feature length had rarely been attempted at this scale. The technical team developed a proprietary snow simulation system that allowed snow to behave differently depending on pressure, temperature, and interaction. This meant characters could leave footprints, kick up powder, or compress snow realistically. The animators also studied real ice formations, traveling to cold environments to observe how light refracts through frozen surfaces. These observations informed the rendering of Elsa's palace, which required intricate calculations to simulate transparency and reflection. Hair simulation was another technological milestone. Elsa's braid alone required complex physics modeling to move naturally through wind and motion. Each strand had to respond to gravity and momentum without looking stiff or artificial. The team built new software tools specifically for this project, pushing the boundaries of what computer animation could accomplish at the time. Storyboarding played a crucial role in shaping tone and pacing. Hundreds of storyboard artists contributed visual interpretations of scenes long before final animation began. Sequences were screened internally in rough sketch form, sometimes with temporary dialogue and music. These early screenings allowed the team to identify emotional gaps or pacing issues. Entire plotlines were reworked during this phase. For example, the character of Hans underwent significant transformation. Early drafts portrayed him more straightforwardly as a romantic lead. Only later did the creative team decide to subvert expectations by revealing his true motives. This twist required careful restructuring so that earlier scenes would contain subtle clues without giving away the reveal. Deleted concepts reveal how fluid the creative process was. At one stage, there was consideration of making Elsa's powers the result of a prophecy or magical curse tied to external forces. This approach was abandoned in favor of making her powers intrinsic and unexplained, which strengthened the metaphorical interpretation of her abilities. Another discarded idea involved a larger ensemble of magical creatures inhabiting the mountains. Ultimately, the story narrowed its focus to emphasize the emotional core between the sisters. Collaboration between departments was constant. When a song was revised, storyboard artists adjusted visual beats. When animators discovered a more expressive gesture, dialogue might be refined to complement it. The process was iterative rather than linear. Sometimes animators would suggest comedic timing adjustments after seeing Josh Gad's vocal improvisations for Olaf. His spontaneous additions often inspired visual gags that were not present in the original script. One notable behind-the-scenes anecdote involves the reindeer Sven. Rather than hiring a separate voice actor for animal sounds, Jonathan Groff provided Sven's vocalizations himself. Animators observed real reindeer behavior at wildlife parks, studying how they blinked, tilted their heads, and shifted weight. This research allowed Sven to feel grounded despite existing in a fantastical setting. The production timeline was intense. Animated features typically take years to complete, and Frozen was no exception. Late-stage story changes meant certain sequences had to be animated under tight deadlines. Despite these pressures, the collaborative atmosphere fostered creative breakthroughs rather than compromise. The studio environment encouraged artists to pitch ideas freely, resulting in a film that feels cohesive despite its long evolution. Lighting and color grading were refined deep into production. Because snow reflects light in complex ways, scenes required careful balancing to avoid overwhelming brightness. Elsa's ice palace scenes used cool blue and violet tones to emphasize isolation, while Arendelle's interior spaces featured warmer hues to represent safety and belonging. These visual decisions were discussed extensively between art directors and technical directors. Frozen's behind-the-scenes journey demonstrates that animated storytelling is as much about revision as inspiration. The final film reflects thousands of creative decisions, technical innovations, and emotional recalibrations. From rewriting Elsa's character after hearing a song demo to inventing new snow simulation software, the project evolved through constant experimentation. What audiences experienced as magical was, in reality, the product of meticulous craftsmanship and collaborative artistry. The behind-the-scenes story mirrors the film's own theme of transformation. Ideas were reshaped, fears were confronted, and creative risks were embraced until the story found its true form. Frozen unfolds with a narrative structure that blends classic fairy tale elements with modern emotional storytelling. Produced by Walt Disney Animation Studios, the film carefully balances spectacle, humor, and heartfelt drama in a way that engages children while offering deeper emotional layers for adults. Its pacing is deliberate, moving from childhood innocence to crisis, exile, adventure, confrontation, and ultimately reconciliation. The story begins with a prologue set in the kingdom of Arendelle. Two young sisters, Elsa and Anna, play together in a ballroom as Elsa uses her magical ability to create snow and ice. This opening sequence establishes both wonder and danger. When Anna is accidentally struck by Elsa's powers, the narrative introduces its central conflict, Elsa's fear of harming those she loves. The visit to the trolls not only heals Anna but plants the seed of emotional repression. The advice to conceal Elsa's powers becomes the psychological anchor of the film. From this early moment, the audience understands that the true tension is not an external villain but internalized fear. The narrative then accelerates with the death of the sisters' parents during a storm at sea. This abrupt loss compresses years into a short montage, showing Elsa isolating herself and Anna growing increasingly lonely. This passage of time functions as emotional groundwork. The castle gates remain closed, symbolizing emotional distance as much as physical separation. The pacing here is quiet but purposeful, allowing the audience to feel the weight of isolation before the main conflict erupts. The coronation day serves as the inciting incident. It is the first time the castle gates are opened in years, introducing new characters and expanding the world beyond the sisters' private tension. Anna's impulsive romance with Hans creates an immediate contrast to Elsa's guarded restraint. The celebratory tone shifts rapidly when Anna asks for Elsa's blessing to marry someone she has just met. Elsa's refusal triggers an argument that spirals into public exposure of her powers. The ballroom confrontation is a crucial turning point. It is both a spectacle and an emotional rupture. Once Elsa flees into the mountains, the narrative transitions from contained palace drama into expansive adventure. Let It Go functions as the midpoint transformation. Structurally, it marks the moment when Elsa embraces isolation as freedom. Narratively, it appears triumphant. However, beneath the spectacle lies unresolved conflict. Elsa has accepted herself but not yet reconciled with her past or her sister. The Ice Palace becomes both sanctuary and prison. This duality is essential to understanding the film's pacing. While children may perceive the sequence as empowerment, adults often sense the fragility of Elsa's decision to withdraw completely. Anna's decision to follow Elsa initiates the road journey segment of the narrative. This portion introduces comedic beats through her partnership with Kristoff and Olaf. The pacing here alternates between humor and urgency. Songs like Do You Want to Build a Snowman earlier in the film established emotional longing, while In Summer provides levity during the darker winter crisis. Olaf's innocence offers breathing room between dramatic confrontations. These lighter moments prevent the narrative from becoming overwhelmingly somber while reinforcing themes of optimism and loyalty. The second major turning point occurs when Anna confronts Elsa in the Ice Palace. The confrontation escalates quickly. Elsa's anxiety resurfaces, and in a moment of panic she strikes Anna's heart with ice. This event raises the stakes significantly. The conflict is no longer emotional distance alone. It is now physical peril. The troll's warning that only an act of true love can thaw a frozen heart introduces a familiar fairy tale solution. At this stage, the audience may anticipate a romantic resolution involving Hans. However, the narrative subverts that expectation. When Hans reveals his ambition and abandons Anna, the film disrupts the traditional prince-savior trope. This twist reframes earlier scenes, encouraging viewers to reconsider assumptions about love at first sight. The pacing tightens as a snowstorm engulfs Arendelle. Elsa is imprisoned, Anna is freezing, and Kristoff races back toward her. Multiple threads converge simultaneously, building toward the climax. The emotional climax occurs not through romantic rescue, but through Anna's choice to sacrifice herself for Elsa. As she turns to ice while shielding her sister from Hans's sword, the film resolves its thematic arc. The act of sisterly love breaks the curse. This moment is carefully constructed through cross-cutting and rising tension. Children experience it as suspenseful action, while adults perceive the emotional catharsis of reconciliation. Elsa's realization that love, not fear, controls her powers completes her character arc. The resolution restores balance to Arendelle. The gates are reopened, symbolizing transparency and connection. Elsa learns to integrate her powers into daily life rather than suppress them. Anna's relationship with Kristoff develops more gradually, suggesting a healthier foundation than her earlier impulsive engagement. Olaf receives his personal flurry, reinforcing the theme that love allows individuality to flourish without harm. Structurally, Frozen follows a three-act framework but adapts it to emphasize internal growth. Act 1 establishes childhood trauma and inciting conflict. Act 2 explores separation and self-assertion. Act 3 confronts betrayal and culminates in sacrificial love. Musical numbers are embedded at key emotional junctures rather than inserted arbitrarily. Each song advances character development or clarifies emotional stakes. This integration of music into narrative pacing gives the film rhythmic momentum. The film's appeal to both children and adults lies in this layered structure. Younger viewers respond to clear stakes, magical visuals, and comedic interludes. Adults appreciate the nuanced portrayal of anxiety, repression, and reconciliation. The subversion of fairy tale conventions feels both surprising and earned because it emerges organically from established character motivations. Frozen's narrative success stems from its careful balance. It honors classic storytelling rhythms while modernizing thematic focus. Its pacing allows moments of quiet longing to coexist with explosive spectacle. Turning points arise from emotional decisions rather than arbitrary events. By anchoring fantasy within relatable human conflict, the film constructs a story that feels timeless yet contemporary. The result is a narrative that unfolds with clarity for children and complexity for adults, ensuring its resonance across generations. Frozen, produced by Walt Disney Animation Studios, presents itself on the surface as a magical adventure about a kingdom trapped in winter. Yet beneath that fantasy framework lies a layered exploration of identity, fear, love, and emotional growth. The film's themes resonate strongly because they are communicated through character experience rather than direct moral instruction. Instead of delivering simple lessons, the story allows viewers, especially children, to interpret meaning through the struggles of Elsa and Anna. One of the central themes is self-acceptance. Elsa's powers are never explained as a curse, a punishment, or a gift from a specific source. They simply exist as part of who she is. From childhood, she learns to hide them after causing harm, and this secrecy becomes internalized shame. Her gloves function symbolically as emotional armor. The more she tries to control herself through suppression, the more her fear grows. The famous moment in which she embraces isolation represents a complicated step towards self-expression, not a full resolution. She is finally honest about who she is, yet she still believes she must live alone. This duality reflects real emotional experiences, where individuals often mistake isolation for safety. The film's message is not that differences disappear, but that acceptance and connection allow differences to coexist with others safely. Fear versus love forms another major thematic axis. Elsa's abilities react directly to her emotional state. When she fears herself, her powers spiral into chaos, freezing the kingdom unintentionally. When she acts with love, she gains control. The narrative therefore externalizes emotion into physical reality. Children understand this visually. Panic creates storms. Calm restores harmony. Adults perceive a psychological metaphor about anxiety and repression. The resolution suggests that emotional awareness, rather than denial, leads to stability. Anna's arc explores optimism and resilience. She grows up isolated but remains open to connection. Her early decision to marry someone she barely knows is not portrayed as foolishness alone. It reflects her deep longing for companionship. As the story progresses, she learns discernment without losing hope. Her willingness to sacrifice herself for Elsa becomes the ultimate expression of unconditional love. The film emphasizes that maturity does not require cynicism. Anna evolves by understanding love more deeply, not by abandoning her trusting nature. The concept of true love is redefined. Traditional fairy tales often present romance as salvation. Frozen challenges this expectation. The supposed romantic hero fails, and the act that breaks the curse is an act of sibling devotion. This shift carries a powerful message for younger audiences. Love is not limited to romantic fulfillment. Familial bonds, friendships, and selfless acts hold equal or greater importance. Parents and children alike recognize the emotional authenticity of this idea because it mirrors real-life relationships more closely than idealized romance. Identity also emerges as a recurring theme. Elsa's struggle mirrors experiences of feeling different or misunderstood. The narrative never labels her difference, which allows viewers to project their own interpretations onto her journey. Some see social anxiety, others see personal insecurity, and some see broader identity metaphors. The film intentionally leaves space for interpretation, making the message adaptable to many personal experiences. What matters is not the nature of the difference, but the courage required to reveal it and the compassion required to accept it. Freedom is presented carefully. Elsa initially believes freedom means escape from society. She builds a palace where she can exist without fear of judgment. However, True freedom arrives only after she reconnects with Anna and learns emotional balance. The film therefore distinguishes between independence and belonging. Freedom is not solitude but authenticity within community. This nuance offers children a meaningful lesson. Being oneself does not require abandoning others. Sacrifice plays a central emotional role. Anna's choice to save Elsa rather than herself contrasts with earlier expectations that she would be saved by a prince. The act is spontaneous and motivated by love rather than obligation. The transformation from frozen statue back to life visually reinforces that selfless compassion has transformative power. The moral is not presented as obligation but as empathy. Caring for others creates mutual healing. The film also addresses emotional repression. Elsa is told to conceal and not feel, advice intended to protect her but ultimately harmful. This instruction becomes a metaphor for suppressing emotions rather than processing them. When she finally expresses herself honestly, even imperfectly, healing becomes possible. The story encourages open communication instead of silent endurance. For younger viewers, this translates into understanding that emotions should be shared, not hidden. Courage appears in multiple forms. Elsa's courage is internal, confronting fear of herself. Anna's courage is external, venturing into danger for someone she loves. Kristoff's courage involves vulnerability, allowing himself to care despite past isolation. Even Olaf demonstrates a simple form of bravery through unwavering loyalty. By presenting diverse expressions of bravery, the film suggests courage is not a single heroic act but a spectrum of emotional risks. Destiny versus choice is subtly explored. Elsa's powers seem predetermined, yet her actions determine their impact. The story rejects the idea that fate alone defines life. Instead, emotional choices shape outcomes. This empowers viewers by suggesting personal growth can change circumstances even when some traits remain constant. Ultimately, Frozen balances fantasy spectacle with grounded emotional lessons. Children see magic, adventure, and humor, while absorbing ideas about empathy and honesty. Adults recognize themes of mental health, familial responsibility, and acceptance. The moral messages never feel imposed because they arise naturally from character decisions. Love conquers fear not as a slogan but as a lived experience demonstrated through sacrifice and understanding. The enduring appeal of the film lies in this thematic richness. It does not claim problems vanish instantly, nor does it portray perfection as achievable. Instead, it proposes that relationships provide strength to navigate imperfection. Identity becomes something to embrace rather than conceal. Family becomes a source of healing rather than obligation. And freedom becomes the courage to be oneself while remaining connected to others. Frozen, created by Walt Disney Animation Studios, stands as a landmark in digital animation not only because of its emotional storytelling but also because of its visual sophistication. The film's animation style blends realism with stylization, using technological innovation and artistic intention to support character development and thematic resonance. Every snowflake, fabric fold, and beam of light contributes to storytelling in ways that go far beyond surface beauty. One of the most immediately striking elements of the film is its depiction of snow and ice. Animating snow had historically been a complex challenge in computer animation. For Frozen, the studio developed new simulation tools to give snow weight, texture, and variability. Rather than appearing as a flat white surface, snow compresses under boots, scatters in powder when kicked, and glistens differently depending on lighting conditions. This physical responsiveness enhances immersion. When Anna trudges through deep snow, the audience feels the resistance. When Elsa's powers erupt into a blizzard, the storm feels tangible rather than decorative. Ice serves not only as environment but as emotional symbolism. Elsa's ice palace is one of the most visually elaborate sequences in the film. Its architecture evolves in real time as she sings, with crystalline staircases spiraling outward and chandeliers forming from fractal patterns. The transparency of the ice required advanced rendering techniques to simulate light refraction and reflection. Visually, the palace represents both freedom and isolation. Its vast openness contrasts with the warm, enclosed interiors of Arendelle's castle. Cool blues and purples dominate the palace scenes, reinforcing emotional distance, while warmer gold and amber tones fill scenes of familial connection. The color palette thus communicates psychological states without the need for dialogue. Character design in Frozen balances stylized features with believable movement. The animators retained the studio's tradition of expressive eyes and slightly exaggerated proportions, yet grounded those elements in nuanced facial animation. Elsa's posture is often rigid, shoulders drawn inward during moments of fear. As she grows more confident, her movements become fluid and expansive. Anna, by contrast, is animated with energetic spontaneity. She trips, flails, and leans forward impulsively, visually reinforcing her optimism and eagerness. These physical distinctions allow viewers, especially children, to read emotional differences instantly. Hair animation represents another technical breakthrough. Elsa's long braid moves with convincing physics, swaying with gravity and reacting to wind. Each strand is digitally simulated rather than painted as a single mass. This attention to detail gives characters a tactile presence. Anna's braided pigtails bounce during action sequences, reinforcing her lively personality. Hair, clothing, and fabric were all treated as dynamic elements rather than static shapes, increasing realism while maintaining stylization. Lighting plays a central role in visual storytelling. Scenes set during the winter crisis often use sharp, high-contrast lighting to emphasize tension. The Ice Palace sequence features cool illumination that reflects off translucent surfaces, creating an ethereal atmosphere. By contrast, early childhood scenes are bathed in soft, diffused light that conveys warmth and innocence. The gradual shift from warm interiors to cold exteriors mirrors the sisters' emotional separation. Once reconciliation occurs, lighting becomes more balanced, symbolizing restored harmony. Environmental design draws inspiration from Nordic landscapes. Fjords, wooden architecture, and Rosemelling-inspired patterns contribute to a distinct cultural aesthetic. The kingdom of Arendelle feels grounded in a specific geographical influence, even though it remains fictional. This grounding helps the fantasy elements feel plausible. The mountains are vast and textured, with wind sweeping across their surfaces. Forests are dense and layered with depth, achieved through careful placement of trees and atmospheric perspective. The sense of scale in wide shots emphasizes both grandeur and isolation. Movement in Frozen is carefully choreographed. Musical sequences are animated with attention to rhythm and pacing. During Let It Go, Elsa's gestures align precisely with vocal phrasing. Her cape release, the transformation of her gown, and the stamping of her foot are timed to musical beats. This synchronization enhances emotional impact. Animators often studied reference footage of performers to capture subtle gestures that feel organic rather than mechanical. As a result, the characters never appear like rigid digital constructs. They breathe, shift weight, and blink with natural irregularity. Facial animation is particularly important in conveying subtext. Small eyebrow raises, tightening lips, or widened eyes communicate emotional shifts before words do. When Elsa accidentally reveals her powers at the coronation, her facial expression transitions from panic to shame in seconds. Children may not articulate these nuances, but they perceive them instinctively. Visual storytelling thus supports narrative depth without explicit explanation. Visual symbolism appears throughout the film. Doors recur as a motif. Elsa closes doors to protect herself, while Anna repeatedly knocks and sings outside them. The act of opening gates at the film's beginning and end visually frames the journey from isolation to openness. Snowflakes themselves become symbolic of individuality. Each one is unique, mirroring the theme of embracing difference. Technologically, Frozen represents a refinement of the studio's digital pipeline, rendering translucent materials, simulating weather systems, and managing complex particle effects required substantial computational power. Yet these technical achievements remain invisible to the casual viewer. What audiences perceive is beauty and fluidity, not algorithms. This seamless integration of technology and artistry exemplifies the evolution of computer animation as both engineering and performance art. The overall style strikes a balance between fairy tale elegance and modern relatability. Costumes are detailed with embroidery and texture, yet remain readable in motion. The camera work mimics live-action cinematography, using sweeping crane shots and intimate close-ups. This cinematic approach enhances emotional immediacy. Frozen's animation style ultimately serves its themes. Cold environments contrast with warm relationships. Rigid postures soften into relaxed gestures. Light shifts from stark isolation to gentle balance. Every visual decision reinforces the emotional arc. The film demonstrates how digital animation can communicate complex psychological states through color, movement, and texture. Rather than functioning as mere spectacle, the visual storytelling deepens character and theme, ensuring that the magical world of Arendelle feels both enchanting and emotionally authentic. Music is the emotional engine of Frozen, shaping character arcs, defining tone, and transforming key narrative moments into unforgettable experiences. Produced by Walt Disney Animation Studios, the film draws heavily from the tradition of Broadway musical storytelling while adapting that structure for contemporary animated cinema. The songs are not decorative interludes. They function as turning points, revelations, and emotional confessions that drive the story forward. The songwriting team of Kristen Anderson-Lopez and Robert Lopez brought strong theatrical sensibilities to the project. Both had extensive experience crafting character-driven songs for the stage, and that influence is clear in Frozen. Each musical number is built around a specific psychological shift. Lyrics are direct yet layered, simple enough for children to understand while containing emotional nuance that resonates with adults. The most iconic song, Let It Go, stands at the center of the film's musical identity. Performed by Idina Menzel as Elsa, the song represents a midpoint transformation. Musically, it begins with restrained piano phrases that mirror Elsa's anxiety, gradually building into a soaring anthem of liberation. The key change and vocal crescendo align with her construction of the Ice Palace, merging visual spectacle with musical climax. The lyrics articulate a rejection of fear and repression, yet they also reveal a fragile confidence. Lines about isolation and breaking free carry both triumph and defensiveness. This duality gives the song emotional complexity beyond a simple empowerment anthem. Its widespread popularity demonstrates how effectively it captured a universal feeling of wanting to shed societal expectations. Do You Want to Build a Snowman functions differently. Rather than a grand anthem, it is structured as a montage song that spans several years. Sung primarily by Kristen Bell as Anna, with additional child performers for younger versions of the character, the song compresses time while deepening emotional stakes. Each verse grows slightly more somber as Anna's hopeful invitations are met with silence. Musically, the melody remains gentle and repetitive, reflecting persistence and longing. This number establishes the emotional foundation of sibling separation, making later reconciliation more powerful. For the First Time in Forever is a dual-perspective song that cleverly intertwines Anna's optimism with Elsa's dread. As Anna prepares excitedly for the coronation day, Elsa sings about her fear of exposure. The overlapping vocal lines create musical tension that mirrors narrative tension. When the reprise appears later in the film during their confrontation in the Ice Palace, the melody remains recognizable but the emotional tone shifts dramatically. What was once hopeful becomes urgent and fractured. This technique of reprising melodies with altered emotional context is a hallmark of strong musical storytelling. In Summer, performed by Josh Gad as Olaf, provides comic relief while reinforcing thematic contrast. The bright orchestration and upbeat tempo celebrate warmth and sunshine, ironically sung by a snowman who does not understand the consequences. The humor works for children because of its silliness, but it also offers adults a playful satire of naive optimism. Musically, the song nods to classic show tunes, complete with brassy flourishes and exaggerated phrasing. Its placement in the narrative allows audiences to breathe before tension escalates again. Love is an Open Door initially appears as a romantic duet between Anna and Hans. Its catchy melody and simple structure mimic traditional fairy tale love songs. However, the later revelation of Hans's motives recontextualizes the number. The song becomes a subtle commentary on impulsive romance. The upbeat tone remains the same, but audience perception shifts. This demonstrates how musical framing can influence narrative interpretation. Beyond the vocal songs, the orchestral score plays a critical role. Composer Christoph Beck crafted a sweeping instrumental backdrop that incorporates Nordic-inspired motifs and choral textures. The score often uses recurring themes associated with Elsa's powers, characterized by shimmering strings and choral echoes that evoke cold expansiveness. Anna's themes are warmer and more rhythmic. When the sisters reconcile, musical motifs blend, symbolizing emotional unity. Sound design enhances the magical realism of Elsa's abilities. The crackling of forming ice, the crystalline chime of snowflakes assembling, and the deep rumble of shifting glaciers give her powers sonic weight. These sounds are carefully layered to feel both beautiful and dangerous. Silence is also used effectively. During moments of shock or emotional realization, background noise drops away, focusing attention on breath or subtle movement. The integration of music and animation required precise synchronization. Animators often worked closely with the songwriters and composers to ensure gestures, camera movement, and environmental changes aligned with musical beats. In Let It Go, each stomp of Elsa's foot corresponds with a surge in instrumentation. In Do You Want to Build a Snowman, the closing of doors is timed with the fading of musical phrases. This choreography between sound and image strengthens emotional immersion. The global reach of the soundtrack further amplified its impact. Translations of Let It Go were recorded in numerous languages, allowing audiences worldwide to connect with the song in their native tongues. This multilingual adaptation reinforced the universality of its themes. Children across cultures sang the same melody, embedding it into collective memory. Music in Frozen functions as narrative dialogue, emotional release, and cultural phenomenon simultaneously. It shapes pacing, defines character psychology, and leaves lasting impressions long after the film ends. The combination of theatrical songwriting, expressive vocal performances, and immersive sound design elevates the film from animated adventure to modern musical classic. Through melody and lyric, Frozen communicates fear, hope, and love in ways that spoken dialogue alone could not achieve, ensuring its songs remain etched into popular culture and personal memory alike. When Frozen premiered in 2013, it quickly moved from being an anticipated animated feature to becoming a defining cinematic event of the decade. Released by Walt Disney Animation Studios, the film achieved both critical acclaim and extraordinary commercial success. Its reception reflected not only admiration for its storytelling and music, but also broader conversations about the evolution of animated cinema. Critics responded positively to the film's emotional focus on sisterhood. Many reviews highlighted the refreshing shift away from a romance-centered narrative. The decision to frame the climactic act of true love around Anna's sacrifice for Elsa was widely praised as a progressive reinterpretation of fairy tale tradition. Commentators noted that this twist felt earned rather than forced, because it grew naturally from the established bond between the sisters. Reviewers also commended the layered portrayal of Elsa, whose internal conflict resonated beyond the archetype of a conventional villain. The music received particular acclaim. Let It Go was frequently described as the standout element, both within the film and as a standalone cultural phenomenon. Critics praised the vocal performance of Idina Menzel and the theatrical strength of the songwriting. The integration of musical numbers into narrative progression was compared to earlier eras of animated musicals, yet with a modern emotional sensibility. The soundtrack's success reinforced the idea that animated films could once again dominate popular music charts. From a technical standpoint, the animation was widely celebrated. Reviewers highlighted the realism of snow effects, the detail of Elsa's ice palace, and the expressive character animation. The visual sophistication was seen as evidence of the studio's continued innovation in computer-generated filmmaking. The balance between stylized character design and environmental realism drew admiration for blending fairy tale aesthetics with contemporary digital craftsmanship. Commercially, Frozen exceeded expectations. It became one of the highest-grossing animated films in history at the time of its release. Its global box office performance demonstrated extraordinary cross-cultural appeal. Families returned to theaters multiple times, and word of mouth significantly boosted its longevity. The film's success was not limited to theatrical runs. Home video sales and digital downloads further expanded its reach, keeping it visible long after its initial release window. Awards recognition followed. Frozen won the Academy Award for Best Animated Feature and Best Original Song for Let It Go. These honors cemented its status as a landmark achievement in animation. The recognition extended beyond awards ceremonies into year-end best-of lists compiled by critics' organizations. The film was frequently cited as one of the strongest animated releases of the decade. However, alongside praise came criticism and debate. Some commentators argued that the film adhered too closely to familiar Disney formulas despite its thematic subversions. They pointed to comedic sidekicks, musical structures, and narrative pacing that followed recognizable patterns. Others questioned whether the villain twist involving Hans was sufficiently developed, suggesting that his shift felt abrupt. While many viewers embraced the subversion of romantic tropes, a minority felt the twist undermined earlier emotional investment in the character. The overwhelming popularity of Let It Go also sparked cultural fatigue. Parents joked about hearing the song repeatedly in their homes, and some critics noted the risk of oversaturation. Yet even this backlash underscored the film's ubiquity. Few animated songs in recent memory had achieved such widespread repetition in everyday life. Conversations around representation also emerged. Some audiences interpreted Elsa's journey as a metaphor for marginalized identities, particularly within LGBTQ communities. Others debated whether the film went far enough in explicitly addressing such themes. While the narrative leaves interpretation open, the discussion itself signaled the film's impact beyond entertainment. Animated storytelling was no longer confined to simple moral lessons. It had become a platform for broader cultural dialogue. Comparisons to earlier animated classics were inevitable. Some critics placed Frozen alongside Renaissance-era musicals for its combination of humor, emotional stakes, and memorable songs. Others viewed it as a transitional work that bridged traditional fairy tale structure with more contemporary psychological themes. Regardless of perspective, few denied its significance within the studio's catalog. Parents generally responded enthusiastically. Many appreciated the emphasis on sibling love and the avoidance of simplistic romantic resolution. Children were captivated by the magical visuals and comedic characters, especially Olaf. The film's ability to engage multiple age groups contributed to its sustained success. Families often described shared viewing experiences where adults and children found different layers of meaning within the same scenes. Educators and psychologists occasionally referenced the film in discussions about emotional literacy. Elsa's struggle with fear and repression provided a relatable entry point for conversations with children about managing emotions. Anna's resilience illustrated perseverance and empathy. The film's accessibility made it useful as both entertainment and informal teaching tool. Despite minor critiques, Frozen's overall reception solidified its reputation as a modern classic. Its awards, box office dominance, and cultural penetration reinforced each other. Debates about its narrative choices only highlighted its relevance. The film sparked discussion not just about animation quality but about storytelling philosophy and representation. In retrospect, Frozen's reception reflects a rare alignment of artistic achievement and mass appeal. It satisfied critics seeking emotional depth and technical innovation, while captivating general audiences with humor and spectacle. Even criticisms contributed to ongoing engagement, proving that the film inspired investment rather than indifference. Through acclaim, debate, and relentless popularity, Frozen established itself as one of the most influential animated films of its era, shaping expectations for what family entertainment could accomplish. The success of Frozen did not end with its original theatrical release. Instead, it marked the beginning of one of the most expansive and influential franchises in modern animation. Produced by Walt Disney Animation Studios, the film quickly evolved from a standalone story into a multi-platform phenomenon that extended across sequels, short films, stage adaptations, theme park attractions, merchandise empires, and long-term brand identity within the Walt Disney Company. The most direct continuation of the story arrived with Frozen 2 in 2019. The sequel expanded the mythology of Elsa's powers and explored the sisters' family history in greater depth. Rather than simply recreating the formula of the first film, the sequel aimed for a more introspective tone. It addressed questions left intentionally open in the original, including the origin of Elsa's abilities and the legacy of their parents. Visually, it pushed animation technology even further, particularly in rendering natural elements such as water and autumn forests. Commercially, Frozen 2 performed at an extraordinary level, becoming one of the highest-grossing animated films ever released. Its success confirmed that the emotional connection audiences felt with the characters had not diminished over time. Between the two feature films, several short films reinforced the franchise's presence. Frozen Fever, released in 2015, centered on Anna's birthday celebration and featured a new original song. The short provided lighthearted continuity while maintaining the central theme of sisterly devotion. Olaf's Frozen Adventure, released in 2017, explored holiday traditions in Arendelle and further developed the sense of community around the characters. These shorter projects allowed audiences to revisit the world without requiring the scale of a full-feature production. They also kept the characters culturally visible during the years between major releases. The franchise expanded beyond film into live performance. Frozen was adapted into a Broadway stage musical, bringing the story back to a theatrical form that echoed the musical backgrounds of its original songwriters. The stage version included additional songs and deeper character exploration, particularly for Elsa. Elaborate costume design and stage effects recreated the magic of ice and snow in a live environment, blending traditional theatercraft with modern projection technology. The musical toured internationally, introducing new audiences to the story and reinforcing its longevity. Theme parks played a central role in Frozen's franchise identity. Attractions based on the film appeared in multiple Disney parks around the world. Frozen Ever After replaced an earlier ride in Epcot, immersing visitors in the kingdom of Arendelle with animatronic figures and familiar songs. Meet and greet experiences featuring Elsa and Anna became some of the most popular character interactions in park history. In Hong Kong and other international locations, entire themed lands were developed around the Frozen universe, demonstrating the franchise's global resonance. These physical environments allowed audiences to step into the story world, transforming cinematic imagination into experiential reality. Merchandise became a defining component of the franchise's legacy. Dolls, costumes, bedding, lunchboxes, and countless other products dominated retail spaces for years. Elsa's blue gown became one of the most recognizable costumes in modern children's culture. The demand for Frozen-themed items was so intense that shortages became widely reported during early holiday seasons. This commercial wave was not simply about branding. It reflected deep identification with the characters. Children incorporated Frozen into daily play, making the franchise part of their personal storytelling. The franchise also extended into publishing and interactive media. Illustrated books expanded side stories, while video games and mobile apps allowed players to engage directly with characters and environments. These extensions reinforced narrative continuity while adapting the story to different formats. Frozen characters appeared in crossover projects, including television specials and animated compilations featuring other Disney properties. This integration strengthened Frozen's place within the broader Disney universe. Within the company's brand identity, Frozen reshaped the modern image of animated princess narratives. Elsa and Anna became central figures in the Disney princess lineup, but with a distinct emphasis on sibling partnership rather than romance. Marketing campaigns frequently highlighted themes of empowerment and family connection. The franchise demonstrated that audiences responded strongly to emotionally complex female leads, influencing future animated projects. Long-term cultural visibility is perhaps the strongest marker of Frozen's legacy. Years after its initial release, references to Let It Go and images of Elsa's ice palace remain instantly recognizable. Halloween costumes, themed birthday parties, and school performances continue to feature Frozen characters. The film's sequel sustained interest rather than diminishing it, and anticipation for future projects within the franchise remains strong. Frozen's expansion into a franchise illustrates how a single animated feature can evolve into a multi-generational brand. Its sequels deepened narrative complexity. Its stage adaptations bridged cinema and live theater. Its theme park attractions transformed fantasy into tangible experience. Its merchandise permeated everyday life. Together, these extensions ensured that Frozen was not a fleeting trend but a sustained cultural presence. The franchise's endurance lies in the emotional core established in the original film. Without the authenticity of Elsa and Anna's relationship, commercial expansion would have felt hollow. Instead, audiences continued to invest because the characters felt meaningful. Frozen became more than a movie. It became a shared mythology, continuously reinterpreted across formats and years. Its legacy within animation history reflects both artistic achievement and strategic expansion, proving that when emotional storytelling resonates deeply, it can support an entire creative universe for generations. Frozen achieved more than commercial success or critical acclaim. It created an emotional connection that crossed age groups, cultures, and social backgrounds. Produced by Walt Disney Animation Studios, the film resonated with children experiencing it for the first time, parents who watched alongside them, and even adults who connected with its themes independently. Its generational reach is rooted in how differently each audience group interpreted the same story while still sharing a common emotional core. For children, the connection often begins with wonder. The magic of snow powers, the bright colors of Elsa's gown, the humor of Olaf, and the adventure through icy mountains create an immediate sensory engagement. Younger viewers are drawn to clear emotional stakes. They understand Anna's loneliness when she sings outside Elsa's door. They recognize fear in Elsa's trembling hands. Children respond instinctively to visible emotion. The film communicates through action and expression, allowing even very young audiences to grasp its central conflict without complex dialogue. Many children see Elsa's abilities as empowering rather than frightening, embracing the fantasy of creating ice castles and snowstorms. For them, Frozen becomes a playground of imagination. At the same time, children often relate deeply to the sister dynamic. Siblings who watch together see elements of their own relationships reflected on screen. Arguments, misunderstandings, and reconciliations feel familiar. The fact that the resolution centers on sibling love rather than romance reinforces bonds within families watching together. Many parents observe children reenacting scenes not as princess and prince, but as sisters supporting each other. Adolescents and teenagers often connect with Elsa's internal struggle. Her fear of exposure and desire to hide parts of herself mirror common experiences during formative years. Feelings of being different, misunderstood, or anxious are common in adolescence. Elsa's journey towards self-acceptance provides symbolic reassurance. Let It Go becomes more than a catchy song. It becomes a personal anthem for expressing individuality. Countless covers and reinterpretations of the song appeared online, performed by teenagers who found their own voice through its lyrics. For adults, the emotional connection can be more layered. Many parents watching Frozen recognize themes of protective parenting and unintended consequences. Elsa and Anna's parents act out of fear, believing isolation will prevent harm. Adults may see this as a reflection of real parenting dilemmas, where protection can sometimes create distance. The film opens conversations about emotional openness within families. Adults also appreciate the subtle humor woven throughout the screenplay. References and comedic timing operate on multiple levels, ensuring that humor is not exclusively child-focused. Nostalgia plays a role as well. Older audiences who grew up during earlier animated musical eras saw Frozen as a revival of the grand musical tradition. Sweeping orchestration, emotional duets, and dramatic ballads evoke memories of past animated classics while presenting modern themes. This blending of familiarity and innovation strengthens cross-generational appeal. Fan communities emerged rapidly after the film's release. Online platforms filled with fan art, cosplay photography, musical covers, and alternative interpretations of scenes. Conventions featured elaborate recreations of Elsa's gown and Anna's coronation dress. Families often participated together, with parents assisting children in crafting costumes or learning songs. Frozen became a shared creative outlet, not merely a passive viewing experience. The emotional attachment extended into everyday rituals. Children insisted on repeated viewings, memorized dialogue, and incorporated Frozen characters into bedtime stories. Parents described both amusement and exhaustion at the frequency of Let It Go playing in their homes. Yet even the jokes about repetition reveal the depth of attachment. Few films inspire such consistent replay without maintaining emotional resonance. The generational resonance is partly due to the universality of its themes. Sibling bonds, fear of rejection, longing for connection, and the relief of reconciliation are experiences not confined to any age group. While younger viewers may interpret the narrative as a magical quest, adults often see a psychological journey about confronting internal barriers. Both interpretations coexist without conflict. Cosplay and live performance strengthened emotional bonds. Children performing Frozen songs at school events gained confidence. Families attending stage adaptations experienced the story in new formats. Singing along to the soundtrack in cars or living rooms turned private enjoyment into communal ritual. The film's music in particular created a bridge between generations. Parents who enjoyed musical theater recognized the craftsmanship of the songs, while children embraced their simplicity and repetition. The emotional connection also stems from character vulnerability. Elsa is not portrayed as flawless. She makes mistakes, reacts out of fear, and struggles to articulate her feelings. Anna is impulsive and naive at times. These imperfections make them relatable. Audiences see themselves in these flaws. Rather than aspiring to unattainable ideals, viewers witness growth through understanding and forgiveness. Over time, Frozen became a reference point within childhood memory. For many born in the early 2010s, it is among the first films they remember vividly. Its songs are tied to birthdays, holidays, and family gatherings. As those children grow older, the film often retains sentimental value. Revisiting it years later reveals layers they may not have noticed before, deepening rather than diminishing attachment. The emotional endurance of Frozen lies in its ability to meet viewers where they are. A child sees magic and humor. A teenager sees identity and self-expression. An adult sees family dynamics and emotional resilience. Each generation extracts meaning relevant to their stage of life, yet all share the same narrative foundation. This layered accessibility ensures that Frozen is not confined to a specific demographic moment. It becomes part of collective memory, carried forward as both entertainment and emotional touchstone across generations. Frozen, created by Walt Disney Animation Studios, builds its emotional strength through carefully constructed character arcs that both draw from classic fairy tale archetypes and reshape them for modern audiences. While the film presents familiar roles such as princess, prince, sidekick, and ruler, each character evolves beyond their expected function. The narrative emphasizes internal transformation rather than external conquest, redefining what heroism looks like within animated storytelling. Elsa stands at the center of this reinterpretation. At first glance, she appears to fit the archetype of the Snow Queen, inspired loosely by Hans Christian Andersen's original tale. Traditionally, such a figure would serve as antagonist, distant and cold both literally and emotionally. Frozen subverts this expectation by making Elsa neither villain nor straightforward heroine. Her primary conflict is internal. She fears her own abilities and the potential harm they may cause. This internal struggle aligns her more closely with the archetype of the reluctant ruler, burdened by responsibility and self-doubt. Her development unfolds in stages. As a child, she is playful and affectionate, yet quickly learns that her powers can injure. The advice to conceal and not feel shapes her into a withdrawn figure. During her coronation, she embodies rigid self-control, physically and emotionally guarded. The exposure of her powers triggers flight rather than aggression. When she sings Let It Go, she appears to embrace a liberating transformation, shedding restraint and claiming independence. However, this is only partial growth. True development occurs when she recognizes that love, not isolation, grants her control. By the conclusion, Elsa integrates her powers into her identity without fear. She becomes a ruler who is both powerful and emotionally open, completing a journey from repression to balance. Anna, by contrast, initially embodies the archetype of the optimistic princess. She is impulsive, romantic, and eager for connection. Her early infatuation with Hans reflects fairy tale conventions, where love at first sight is celebrated. However, Anna's development challenges this simplicity. Her journey is one of discernment and resilience. She begins naive about the world beyond the castle gates, yet her determination drives her into the unknown. Throughout her travels with Kristoff, she learns to navigate disappointment without losing hope. Her willingness to sacrifice herself for Elsa marks the culmination of her growth. Unlike traditional heroines who await rescue, Anna becomes the agent of salvation. Her arc transforms the princess archetype into one defined by courage and empathy rather than romantic fulfillment. Kristoff represents a variation of the rugged outsider archetype. Raised by trolls and working as an ice harvester, he lives on the margins of society. Initially skeptical and blunt, he contrasts with Anna's warmth. Yet beneath his gruff exterior lies vulnerability. His gradual emotional opening mirrors a reverse fairy tale trope. Instead of a prince rescuing a princess, Kristoff supports Anna's quest and respects her autonomy. His development is subtle but meaningful. He learns to express affection honestly rather than through sarcasm. In doing so, he embodies a modern interpretation of masculinity that values support and partnership over dominance. Hans initially appears as the archetypal charming prince. His polished manners and romantic duet with Anna reinforce expectations rooted in classic fairy tales. However, the revelation of his ambition repositions him as antagonist. This twist serves not only as plot device but as commentary on the reliability of surface charm. Hans represents opportunism masked as affection. His role deconstructs the notion that nobility of title equates to nobility of character. While some viewers debate the abruptness of his transformation, thematically he functions as a cautionary figure about misplaced trust. Olaf fulfills the comic relief archetype yet transcends it. As a snowman brought to life by Elsa's childhood magic, he symbolizes innocence preserved despite hardship. His humor operates on multiple levels, appealing to children through physical comedy and to adults through subtle irony. Yet Olaf also articulates profound truths in simple language. His song in summer expresses longing for warmth without understanding its danger, reflecting naive optimism. However, his willingness to melt beside Anna to comfort her demonstrates emotional depth. Olaf's archetype evolves from mere sidekick to embodiment of unconditional love. The trolls serve as a form of mythic guide archetype. They provide exposition and healing, echoing traditional fairy tale wise elders. However, their advice to conceal Elsa's powers inadvertently contributes to her repression. This nuance prevents them from being purely benevolent figures. Their role highlights the unintended consequences of protective instincts. In Frozen, archetypes are not discarded but reshaped. The queen is not evil but anxious. The princess is not passive but decisive. The prince is not savior but deceiver. The outsider is not solitary but loyal. The sidekick is not trivial but emotionally insightful. This restructuring reflects contemporary storytelling priorities. Audiences are invited to question assumptions inherited from older narratives. Character relationships drive development more than individual quests. Elsa's growth depends on Anna's sacrifice. Anna's maturity emerges through confrontation with betrayal and forgiveness. Kristoff's emotional openness is nurtured through companionship. The arcs are interconnected, reinforcing the theme that identity is shaped within relationships. The film's approach to archetypes ensures accessibility for children familiar with fairy tale conventions while offering depth for adults who recognize the subversions. Frozen demonstrates that modern animated storytelling can honor traditional structures while revising their implications. Through layered character development, the film transforms familiar roles into vehicles for emotional authenticity and contemporary relevance. In Frozen, costume design, physical appearance, and environmental detail are not simply decorative elements. They function as storytelling devices that communicate personality, emotional state, cultural influence, and social structure. Produced by Walt Disney Animation Studios, the film creates a cohesive world where clothing, architecture, and landscape work together to immerse audiences in the kingdom of Arendelle and beyond. The design of Elsa's costumes reflects her internal journey more clearly than almost any line of dialogue. During her coronation, she wears a structured, dark teal gown with a high collar and long sleeves. The silhouette is formal and restrained, mirroring her emotional containment. The gloves she wears are especially symbolic. They serve as physical barriers between her powers and the world, representing the instruction she has internalized to conceal and not feel. The tight bodice and upright posture reinforce her anxiety and the weight of royal responsibility. When Elsa flees to the mountains and sings "Let It Go," her transformation is visual as well as emotional. Her gown shifts into a shimmering ice blue dress with a flowing translucent cape. The sleeves disappear, the collar lowers, and the fabric sparkles like frost. The design is lighter, more fluid, and visually expansive. The cape trails behind her like a streak of winter wind. This costume evolution communicates liberation. Yet the dress also maintains sharp, crystalline lines, hinting that her newfound freedom still carries isolation. The costume designers carefully balanced elegance with symbolism, ensuring that children would find the dress enchanting while adults could perceive its deeper meaning. Anna's wardrobe also tracks her development. In early scenes, she wears vibrant colors, including warm greens and magentas. Her coronation dress features floral patterns inspired by Scandinavian folk art, signaling both cultural grounding and youthful optimism. When she embarks on her journey into the mountains, her outfit becomes more practical, consisting of a dark skirt, boots, and a cloak. The practicality emphasizes her willingness to step outside palace comfort. Her braids, which frame her face, reinforce approachability and warmth. Unlike Elsa's sleek transformation, Anna's appearance remains rooted in earthy tones, underscoring her grounded personality. Kristoff's design reflects his life outside royal structures. His clothing is functional and layered, made of heavy fabrics suitable for cold climates. The muted browns and grays blend into natural surroundings, emphasizing his connection to the rugged environment. Fur accents and sturdy boots communicate survival rather than ceremony. His silhouette contrasts sharply with palace formality, reinforcing his outsider status. As he grows emotionally closer to Anna, his visual identity remains stable, suggesting authenticity rather than transformation. Olaf's design appears simple but carries thematic weight. Composed of rounded snow segments, twig arms, and a carrot nose, he embodies childlike innocence. His wide eyes and expressive mouth allow animators to convey exaggerated emotion with clarity. His bright white form stands out against darker winter backdrops, symbolizing optimism within hardship. Despite being made of snow, his design feels warm because of his facial expressiveness and playful movement. World-building in Frozen draws heavily from Nordic landscapes and architecture. The kingdom of Arendelle features steep rooflines, wooden structures, and decorative motifs inspired by Scandinavian design traditions. Rosemelling-style floral patterns appear in textiles and painted details, grounding the fantasy setting in recognizable cultural aesthetics. Fjords and towering cliffs surround the kingdom, creating a sense of geographical isolation. This physical isolation mirrors the emotional isolation between the sisters during much of the film. The contrast between Arendelle and the North Mountain enhances narrative tension. Arendelle's harbor and castle interiors are warm and bustling, filled with textured fabrics and flickering candlelight. The North Mountain, by contrast, is vast and windswept. Snow blankets the terrain, and jagged ice formations dominate the skyline. Elsa's ice palace rises from this stark environment like a crystalline sculpture. Its interior features geometric patterns and refracted light that evoke both beauty and solitude. The palace feels simultaneously majestic and empty, reinforcing Elsa's emotional state. Costume and environment also communicate social hierarchy. Royal attire features intricate embroidery and structured silhouettes, while townspeople wear simpler garments in muted colors. Visiting dignitaries are distinguished by varied clothing styles, subtly suggesting a wider political world beyond Arendelle. These visual cues expand the universe without extensive exposition. The film's attention to texture deepens immersion. Fabrics appear tactile, with visible stitching and layered materials. Snow gathers realistically on cloaks and boots. Ice reflects light differently depending on thickness and angle. These details create a believable world even within fantasy. Children may not consciously analyze such textures, but they feel the authenticity subconsciously. Color palette serves as emotional language throughout the world building. Warm golds and reds dominate scenes of familial connection. Cool blues and silvers define isolation and fear. During the climax, when Anna freezes while saving Elsa, the surrounding environment becomes almost monochromatic, heightening dramatic tension. After reconciliation, colors soften and balance returns. Visual harmony mirrors emotional harmony. Frozen's world feels cohesive because design decisions align with narrative themes. Identity, freedom, and belonging are expressed not only through dialogue but through fabric, architecture, and landscape. The careful integration of costume and environment ensures that Arendelle is not a generic fairy tale kingdom but a place with cultural texture and emotional resonance. Through visual design, the film invites audiences to inhabit its world fully, making the journey of its characters feel grounded within a richly imagined setting. Upon its release in 2013, Frozen quickly evolved from anticipated animated feature to global cultural phenomenon. Produced by Walt Disney Animation Studios and distributed by Walt Disney Pictures, the film achieved both commercial and critical success, reshaping the trajectory of modern animated musicals. Its widespread popularity extended beyond box office revenue, influencing fashion, music, merchandising, and discussions about representation in children's media. Critically, Frozen was praised for its animation quality, musical composition, and emotional depth. Reviewers highlighted the balance between humor and sincerity, as well as the central sister relationship. The soundtrack, composed by Kristen Anderson-Lopez and Robert Lopez, played a crucial role in this acclaim. The song, Let It Go, performed in the film by Idina Menzel, became an international anthem. It won the Academy Award for Best Original Song at the Academy Awards and achieved massive commercial success across multiple languages. The soundtrack album topped charts worldwide, reinforcing the film's musical legacy. Financially, Frozen surpassed expectations. It became one of the highest-grossing animated films of all time and, at the time of its release, the highest-grossing animated feature in history. Its success demonstrated the continued viability of animated musicals in an era dominated by action franchises and sequels. The film's profitability also revitalized Disney's fairy tale adaptations, paving the way for further animated and live-action reinterpretations of classic stories. Culturally, Frozen resonated because it reframed familiar themes. Audiences responded strongly to the portrayal of sisterhood as the narrative core. Rather than centering romantic love, the film emphasized familial bonds and self-acceptance. This shift sparked discussions among critics and scholars about evolving gender narratives in mainstream animation. Elsa, in particular, became an emblem of empowerment for many viewers. Her struggle with identity and control was interpreted through multiple lenses, including psychological growth and broader themes of difference and belonging. Merchandising amplified the film's reach. Elsa and Anna costumes became staples at children's events and Halloween celebrations. Toys, books, and clothing lines extended the film's visual identity into everyday life. Theme parks incorporated Frozen attractions, most notably at Epcot within Walt Disney World, where Frozen Ever After replaced a previous attraction to reflect the franchise's popularity. These expansions illustrate how the film transitioned from cinematic release to enduring brand presence. The film's influence also extended to language and digital culture. Phrases like, "Let It Go" entered everyday speech as shorthand for emotional release. The song generated countless covers and parodies on platforms such as YouTube, contributing to its viral status. Children memorized lyrics, and the soundtrack became a shared cultural reference point across generations. While some parents humorously expressed fatigue at repeated listens, The ubiquity of the music underscored its cross-demographic appeal. Academically, Frozen has been examined in discussions about postmodern fairy tales. Scholars note its subversion of Prince Charming tropes and its nuanced antagonist structure. The twist involving Hans prompted analysis about trust, power, and narrative expectation. Meanwhile, Elsa's ambiguous status as neither villain nor conventional heroine reflects a broader trend toward morally complex characters in children's media. The film's success led to expanded storytelling within the franchise. Short films such as Frozen Fever and Olaf's Frozen Adventure explored character dynamics further. Ultimately, the release of Frozen 2 demonstrated the enduring appetite for the world and its characters. The sequel deepened mythological elements and further explored themes of identity and heritage, confirming that Frozen was not a singular cultural moment but an ongoing narrative universe. Legacy is measured not only in revenue but in emotional imprint. For many children growing up in the 2010s, Frozen became a formative cinematic experience. Its emphasis on love between sisters provided representation of family dynamics often secondary in earlier princess narratives. The technical achievements in snow simulation and fabric animation influenced industry standards, pushing computer animation toward greater realism. In retrospect, Frozen occupies a significant place in the history of animated film. It bridged nostalgia and innovation, honoring musical traditions while modernizing narrative priorities. Its cultural saturation rivaled that of earlier Disney milestones, establishing Elsa and Anna as iconic figures within contemporary popular culture. More than a commercial success, Frozen became a reference point in conversations about storytelling evolution, demonstrating how a fairy tale can be reshaped to reflect changing social values while maintaining universal emotional resonance. Frozen endures not simply because of its songs, humor, or visual spectacle, but because it represents a turning point in contemporary fairy tale storytelling. The film honors traditional narrative structures while simultaneously reshaping them to align with evolving cultural values. By centering emotional authenticity over romantic destiny, it redefines what constitutes a happily ever after. One of the film's most significant achievements lies in its thematic cohesion. Identity, fear, love, and freedom are woven consistently through character arcs, musical sequences, and visual design. Elsa's journey illustrates that power without self-acceptance leads to isolation, while Anna's arc demonstrates that courage and compassion can alter fate. Their reconciliation affirms that healing often requires vulnerability rather than conquest. Instead of defeating an external villain through force, the story resolves through emotional revelation and sacrifice. This narrative shift signals a broader transformation within animated cinema. Earlier fairy tales frequently relied on binaries: good versus evil, hero versus villain, prince versus threat. Frozen complicates these oppositions. Elsa is neither antagonist nor flawless heroine. She is human in her fear. Hans embodies charm without integrity, reminding audiences that appearances can mislead. Even secondary characters carry emotional nuance, contributing to a layered story world rather than a simplistic moral framework. The film also reframes love itself. Romantic love remains present, particularly in Anna's developing relationship with Kristoff, yet it is not the narrative's ultimate solution. Instead, sisterly devotion becomes the act of true love that breaks the curse. This redefinition broadens the emotional vocabulary available to children's media. It affirms that love is multifaceted and that family bonds can hold as much narrative power as romance. Technically, Frozen marks a milestone in digital animation. Advances in snow physics, fabric rendering, and lighting design enhanced immersion and set new standards within the industry. Yet these achievements serve the emotional core rather than overshadow it. The spectacle of Elsa's ice palace, for instance, is breathtaking not merely for its crystalline geometry, but for what it represents: isolation crafted into beauty. The film's long-term resonance can be traced to its balance between accessibility and depth. Children engage with its humor, songs, and colorful characters. Adults recognize themes of repression, responsibility, and personal growth. This cross-generational appeal ensures its continued relevance. Frozen does not rely solely on novelty. It sustains meaning through repeated viewings. Ultimately, Frozen demonstrates that fairy tales are living narratives. They evolve alongside the societies that tell them. By transforming archetypes rather than discarding them, the film bridges tradition and modernity. It shows that strength can coexist with vulnerability, that leadership can emerge from empathy, and that liberation requires understanding rather than escape. In this way, Frozen stands as more than an animated feature. It is a cultural marker of storytelling in the 21st century, one that suggests the most powerful magic is not ice or spectacle, but emotional truth. Frozen, produced by Walt Disney Animation Studios, occupies a unique position when viewed in the broader context of animated cinema. While it shares lineage with earlier Disney classics such as The Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, and The Lion King, Frozen distinguishes itself through its thematic complexity, visual innovation, and narrative subversion. Analyzing these distinctions highlights the evolution of animation from traditional hand-drawn musicals to sophisticated digital storytelling that engages both children and adult audiences. Earlier Disney animated classics typically followed a clear narrative trajectory. A young protagonist, often female, faces adversity, encounters magical intervention or guidance, and achieves a resolution largely framed around romantic fulfillment. In contrast, Frozen reframes this formula. While it incorporates musical numbers and fantasy elements, its central relationship is sibling-based rather than romantic. The story emphasizes internal growth, emotional honesty, and relational authenticity over external conquest. This shift demonstrates a broader trend within modern animation to explore psychology and moral ambiguity rather than relying solely on archetypal tropes. Visually, Frozen represents a leap forward from its predecessors. Where films like Beauty and the Beast relied on hand-drawn animation enhanced with early digital techniques, Frozen leverages fully computer-generated imagery with unprecedented attention to naturalistic physics. Snow, ice, and fabric are rendered with a level of detail and realism that was previously unattainable. For example, Elsa's ice palace sequences employ complex light refraction, particle effects, and dynamic simulations that allow the environment to interact meaningfully with character motion. This technical sophistication enables a more immersive emotional experience, as environmental cues reinforce psychological states. Audiences are not simply observing magic, they feel its presence. Frozen's musical approach also bridges stage and screen in a way that differs from prior animated features. While the Renaissance-era musicals relied on songs to punctuate key plot points, Frozen integrates music as a direct vehicle for character psychology. Let It Go is not only a moment of spectacle but a profound internal revelation. Songs function as narrative accelerators rather than mere embellishments. This approach aligns with Broadway conventions yet translates them effectively into cinematic animation, demonstrating how musical storytelling can evolve in the digital age. Character representation further illustrates a shift. In earlier classics, protagonists often relied on male saviors or external forces to resolve conflict. Frozen subverts this expectation. Elsa, a character with immense power, must confront internal fears, and Anna, traditionally a romantic heroine, acts as savior for her sister. Secondary male characters like Kristoff support rather than dominate the narrative. Even the antagonist role is nuanced. Hans appears charming yet is morally flawed, illustrating that threat can emerge from deception rather than inherent evil. This complexity offers audiences a richer palette of interpersonal dynamics than earlier archetypal storytelling. The pacing and narrative structure of Frozen also reflect contemporary animation trends. While older films maintained linear progression with clear moral markers, Frozen employs interwoven emotional threads and timed musical sequences that reinforce character growth. Montages, reprises, and overlapping vocals, particularly in songs like For the First Time in Forever, create multi-layered storytelling. These techniques demand greater attention from audiences, rewarding repeated viewings with increasing depth. Frozen's integration of visual symbolism further differentiates it from earlier films. Doors, snowflakes, and ice are not merely aesthetic choices but narrative instruments that communicate identity, emotional states, and relational distance. The film's use of color, contrast, and texture conveys psychological nuance alongside dialogue. For example, the warm hues of Arendelle's interiors contrast sharply with the icy blues of Elsa's palace, reinforcing the emotional tension between openness and isolation. Previous classics often relied on visual cues for setting or mood, but rarely to communicate character interiority at this level of refinement. In terms of legacy, Frozen signals an evolution of animated storytelling toward more emotionally resonant, technically sophisticated, and culturally nuanced narratives. It retains the universality and accessibility that defined early Disney films while inviting adult audiences to engage critically with themes of identity, fear, and relational complexity. It bridges the gap between traditional musical fairy tales and postmodern narratives where empowerment, moral ambiguity, and self-discovery coexist. Comparing Frozen to contemporary animation from other studios also highlights its distinctiveness. While many modern films employ computer-generated imagery, few integrate musical theater, narrative subversion, and thematic depth with the same precision. Frozen demonstrates that family entertainment can achieve commercial success while presenting sophisticated psychological and emotional storytelling. It balances spectacle, humor, and pathos, creating a template for future animated films that aspire to appeal to multiple generations simultaneously. Ultimately, Frozen reflects the ongoing evolution of animated cinema, a synthesis of technical innovation, musical heritage, and narrative sophistication. It honors the legacy of past classics while expanding the possibilities of what an animated fairy tale can achieve. The film illustrates that modern audiences desire more than escapism. They seek emotional authenticity, complex characters, and resonant themes, all delivered through the transformative medium of animation. In this way, Frozen is both a continuation of and a departure from traditional storytelling, cementing its place as a defining work within 21st-century animated film.